that. They see like death as a punishment for being alive.
Oh, say that one more time. Say that one more time, man. That's so good.
People see death as a punishment for being alive.
Rising Man fam, I got another amazing guest joining me here today. I'm going to give it my best shot here, man. Kale Ka'alekahi from Maui. Nailed it. There we go. What's up, bro? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Jeddy.
Yeah, we had to hit the record buttons real quick because we started catching fire, and I didn't want to miss many brilliant gems that you were about to drop. So here we go, man. Rolling right into it.
Right on.
I'm gonna hit you with a big punch on the first one. What does it mean to be a man?
That is a big one. What does it mean to be a man? I've been able to understand that by way of knowing what it's not as well. So not just like what it is. So for example, like I have these tattoos on my arm, and I got these a while ago. Yet in the design is what we call like a lehala. So there's a plant here in Hawaii and in other islands. There's like a pandanus tree. And the leaves, you know, they kind of droop. They almost look like a Dr. Seuss tree or something, you know, to give people an image. But it's, these leaves we clean and then we can strip, and now we can weave them into mats or sails or hats and adornments, baskets and things like that. So the tree of hala actually means like a withering or to die. Like when something hala, it withers and dies. But in that death, life is created, right? It's like those leaves that have fallen to the ground, then create new life. You know, now we make a sail, now we're on our boats and we're traveling. So this design is that of the fruit. The fruit on there is funny. It looks like kind of looks like a pineapple. So when tourists come, they're like, "Oh, is that a pineapple tree?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a pineapple tree. The pineapple was growing up there." It's like, no, pineapples grow in the bushes on the ground, not in trees. So whoever's listening, pineapples don't grow in trees, so don't fall for it.
All right, I already learned something.
I already learned something, right? So the fruit actually has like little keys in it, right? So you pop them out and you cut them and they make little triangles. And you have a whole lei. It's this beautiful lei. It can be orange, yellow, you know, green at times. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's in the death and the life, right? The transfiguration of a person throughout different life stages. So, you know, we have childhood, and childhood is like early, middle, late, you know, adolescence, early, middle, late, adulthood, early, middle, late. You know, we don't really give much attention to these different stages in life. So for me, being a man, it was like, okay, what's the difference between a male and a man? You know, I'm born a male, right? I have to earn being a man. That's something I have to learn. Like there's rites of passages that need to be journeyed through and felt and seen and experienced. A male tends to be selfish, right? Like a child. A male tends to just only look out for themselves, only will fight for themselves, will destroy whatever does not, you know, suit the desire. But a man protects and provides and sets boundaries and limits upon actions and behaviors like that in order to keep everyone secure, you know, not just create safe spaces, because I don't believe in that. Like, life is a risk, and men have to understand what the risks are, and the risks are high, you know, just to be alive. So a man being able to, you know, set like a boundary or a limit, and it's permeable. It's not about exclusivity. It's saying, hey, what's healthy and what's not healthy. You know, what is good for the village is good for me. If it's not good for the village, not good for me. I don't want it. You know, neither do they. So it's like being able to be responsible, you know, in your actions. How do you respond? Man. Yeah. Sorry, it's kind of a long answer, but
no, it's actually I was going to say it's actually a very, very short and truncated answer of many layers and elements that I also agree with. Indicate a man. There is the element of community, of selflessness. Yes. Oftentimes I used to ask this question as, what's the difference between a boy and a man? And then it changed. Yeah. But for me, when I would answer this question, because then people wanted to always ask me, I would say that, you know, boyhood is I'm facing inward, right? I'm looking at myself, my self-interest, my growth, what I want, what I desire.
Yes.
The flip to manhood is when I turn and face outward, and I start looking at what's happening around me. How am I improving my community? You said village, and just improving the people around me. So you captured that. You captured, you know, what does it mean to really earn the mantle of manhood? What does that really look like? I'm just so on board with that, man. It made me curious when you were talking about safety and security, because that's a really good angle there, man. That's a good distinction to make, because the world is dangerous. I like to say that nature's violent. Like if anybody's ever watched any nature documentaries, or you go deep enough into the woods and the wilderness, nature's violent, man. Like babies get eaten in nature, and things get ripped to shreds, and we're so disconnected from that element of our nature within ourselves that anything that even touches that or comes close, we decide is not safe. But what do you think is the value of us reconnecting and having a relationship with violence, and just the appreciating that that's part of nature?
Oh yeah, it was beautiful. I feel so much about this understanding of how nature is. So, like in indigenous languages, for many of them, they don't have a word for nature, right? Like there is no separation between who we are as human beings and to nature. Is we are of this all the time. So there isn't a word for it. So I almost kind of, make the case that because we've created this idea and concept of what nature is, you put in this idealism of it being like perfect, in all of its ways, yet we're not really understanding nature, because if we did, we would know how violent nature is. And the violence is not somehow a low vibration or a low frequency or something less than nature is not here for us to then transcend her or it, if we say, which is what we're doing as human beings, like in this society, in this culture. So of course we're going to demonize and push back on violence, because our society that is of a colonizer, imperialist nature continues to outsource our violence and only deems what violence is acceptable if it's an entertainment. You see what I mean? If it's not entertainment, then you shouldn't be doing it. And for me,
if it crosses a certain boundary or a certain line, right?
Exactly. If it crosses a certain line, like only people who should have a gun are the ones that are soldiers in the military, right? But it doesn't mean those guys know how to dance or sing or laugh or play or do any of that. They're soldiers. That's not warriorhood. It's a form of violence, of extraction. So if you are a soldier, and I'm not saying anything bad about them, I'm just saying these are the facts. You're given access to be violent because you can take orders and you will do as you're told and you will not question those orders, right? So this is kind of going back to what a man is. A man has to determine and have good discernment upon what that is. Is this detrimental for our people, or is this beneficial for our people? Are we in exaltation or are we in diminishment? And so with violence, it's the same. All of us have emotions and feelings. These are gifts from our ancestors. These are codes of communication. It's other language. It's not about one is greater or better than another, and this one is evil. That's where we're getting confused. That we somehow have this dichotomy of what's good and evil, right? Or righteousness and evilness, or good and bad and right and wrong. Like that's what's messing us up. Violence does not care. Nature does not care about any of that. Nature is not concerned with those things. In order for life to continue, death must happen. And the death doesn't always have to be the actual physical death, which is real. I mean, you pick up dirt in your hand. That dirt is everything that once was alive. And now it is dead and it is crumbled into dust. And that dust is what our plants grow in. That's dust, the dirt, the soil, all those things. Are we determining that as not violent? You see what I mean?
Yeah, I totally see what you mean, man. And
yeah. So it's our association of this society as to what this violence is what's out of balance. It's out of harmony. Yeah.
Right. And on the flip side of things, like in contrast to soldiers who are given permission and authority, and police officers who carry weapons, right, and have a license to kill under certain parameters and circumstances.
Exactly.
How unusual would it be for a man to be seen going outside of his house and screaming at the top of his lungs, or two men who needed to get out their aggressive energy and started wrestling in the middle of the road, right? Like those are things that if we saw that, it would be more alarming than a man that I don't know walking around in the street with a rifle because he's wearing a uniform.
Exactly. Thank you, brother.
So
thank you for bringing that.
So we're on the same page, right? I think we're just kind of looking at this narrative very curiously. At what point did we deem that this was the appropriate parameters for violence to exist in our society? Because I'm not on board with that. I'm definitely not. I want my son to grow up wrestling his brothers and his relatives, like expressing that vital energy. When you said emotions and feelings are codes from our ancestors, I was like, yeah. And what happens when we're not making a relationship with the extreme ends of the spectrum that most of our society is uncomfortable with?
Agreed.
Anger, grief, sadness, exhilaration. Right? Even just to express yourself wildly, ecstatically joyful is unusual. You're crazy, man. You're crazy. Tone it down.
Right. Yeah. Right?
So say a little more about just emotions and feelings and the value that has for men right now.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, you know, that expression of being alive happens in dancing and in fighting and like making love, right? So, you know, dance, fight, fuck. It's like all those things are attached, and all those things evoke and invoke emotion. So an evocation is something outwards, and invocation is something within, right? So when we have an emotion like anger, if we are in a good, balanced, you know, healthy state of being, whether it's masculine or feminine, and I'm like angry, okay, I gotta release this anger. Now there's an invitation for me and my brother to do a little dance. Now we can start fighting or hold mitts, or we can start wrestling. It's like, now here's the invitation. Or even with my beloved, you know, my relationship. It's like, you know, I'm feeling this anger come up. I want to release it. I want to move. She's like, well, come dance with me. You know, dance, turn on the music. We just start moving. So there's an invitation for relationship, right? An invitation for communion, right? For people to come together because of those emotions. Sometimes people are angry. They need to go out and be in solitude in nature to release, get their bare feet on the ground, and let the mother take care of them. You know, and there's that too. So there's an invitation for relationship once again with the outside living world. So let the emotions guide you, right? And let's talk about joy too. Joy in dance, joy in fighting, joy in creating meals, everything like that. It's like giving us opportunities to be in relationship. And that's why we say these words of like all my relations. It's like, because the codes from our ancestors are in our emotions. And the more expression we have of that, the more we fully embrace it, a deeper understanding of what masculinity is can show up, or what femininity is can show up, because we have more of us participating in life that way rather than being flatlined, right? Just numbed out.
Totally, man. Yeah. And you say relationships. I always tell people that I didn't invest in real estate. I didn't invest in businesses. I didn't invest in my 401k, but I spent my 20s and my early 30s investing in relationships. And I think it's the best return on investment you can make. And here we are living in a world where most people don't even know their neighbors anymore.
Yes,
we put up these, you know, boxes and particular lines of division with fences and stuff around each other because we've created this story that my neighbors are not safe. I need to protect my own. I need to literally put up physical boundaries because I can't protect my own boundaries physically, mentally, emotionally, with my language. When you really stop and look at this for a second, you're like, oh man, this is almost completely backwards.
Right. You know, I so agree. And this is where, you know, what you're speaking to me about as well, as like, you know, if a man goes out and just starts screaming, you know, how jarring or shocking it is for us, or like two guys out in the street just brawling it out, and then all of a sudden it's like we need to get law enforcement involved. Right. You know, it's like we don't know how to handle anything ourselves because we've become domesticated people. You know, we've allowed ourselves to be domesticated. We've lost our true sovereignty because we believed in the marketing campaign of what was being sold to us as the American dream. You know, this idea, this concept that we should all have a home, and then we should all, you know, have 401ks and retirement plans. You know, essentially to me, it's just like a domesticated animal. You know, we've lost our wildness. Like we gave it up because we wanted safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And safety that comes from someone else.
Uncertainty.
Safety that someone else can provide and package and sell at the stores. Right. I mean, that's really what we bought into. And when I really think about it, and when I think about my children, right, and especially I think about my son, I think about my daughter, what do I want them to be able to provide for themselves?
Yeah.
Not because I want them to live in isolation, right? It's not like I want to recreate the lone wolf story, but the story of the village is that everyone had value. Everyone knew what their position and their role was. Everyone could take care of themselves, and therefore they were more capable of taking care of each other.
Exactly.
That's the way that it was designed, like by design, by biological design. This is, we as social mammals are meant to operate and function in this way together. But when I'm built and trained to depend on certain things for my survival, my ability to take care of and protect my family, that doesn't make me feel like more of a man.
No,
not at all. Like no. Kind of the opposite. You know?
Yeah, kind of the opposite. Which to me would be, I don't know, what is the opposite of that? Like I feel more like a coward. I feel useless, helpless. I don't feel like it's even hard for me to think of these names because I don't live my life like that. You know, I'm not choosing that. Like when I think about your children, or any of my other brother's children, my nephews and my nieces, I'm like, yeah. I want to give to them what I didn't have when I was younger, but not in the material, in relationships, like in spirit, in culture, in love, in emotion, a freedom that they can give themselves by witnessing how I am, like they don't have to be like me or like dad, but they know that they're given the permission, they're given the invitation always without it having to be like, hey, look at this. It's just like, watch us live. Watch us do
it. And that's what it requires, right? And that's why it's so important that we recognize this, right? Like snap ourselves out of this spell that we're under and have the awareness like, oh, okay, that is actually not the version of manhood or masculinity I want to embrace. So what is, right? And then start to look at these other possibilities. I want to go into a bit of your background too, because a great part of the conversation that we get to have is I want to hear more about your upbringing. And I know that there's a lot of guys who are going to listen to this and say, whoa, that sounds amazing. I wish I grew up a little bit more like Kale. I know that I already feel like that myself, but there's many of us who don't grow up around this culture, around culture in general, or the culture that we get older and we realize I don't want any of that. Like I want to just start over fresh. So a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you have to say about that.
Totally. Yeah. So, I was growing up on the islands, and I moved around, with my mother too. And I was raised by my grandparents for a time. And so it was on the island of Molokai. So, I was immersed in this understanding of being a Hawaiian because I was on homestead land and around welfare and all these things. Yet we had each other. I had my cousins. We had a lot of time to play. There was like all kinds of things that I was learning at the time that I didn't really know was the cultural thing until I grew up. You know what I'm saying? So I think what it is.
Even as a child, like you were around it, but there wasn't, it wasn't being enforced or
no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't until I graduated from high school and I started going to Halal, which is cultural school, where the understanding of dance, chant, music, oral traditions, traditional life ways, all these things started coming to, my life. And then from there, I was able to look back on my childhood and be like, oh my gosh, they were teaching me the culture all this time. Like the subtleties, the nuances, the layers of culture, not just the big things like, oh, here's another hula dance and here you do this chant and this is how you hit the thing. It was like what all of that comes from is what I was learning. I was given the foundation and the soil from my grandparents on how to be as an indigenous person. And then when I went to Halal, that's when I actually got to expand into the art form of it, to create beauty through the culture in this way. Where from my upbringing, I learned how to live in that village and be nestled in it. And so
did you decide to go to Halal? Was that your choice?
I decided to, because I had, went to high school in Japan. So I ended up not having my culture around me. And it was very hard for me. I didn't realize how much living a life and assimilating into city life was actually very damaging to my soul, because I grew up as just this kid in Hawaii. So it was like learning about who I am at my core was very difficult, because I wasn't being taught how to be a human. I was being taught how to go to university, to achieve, to be an athlete, to be all these things besides myself. So I had to go to cultural school to learn again, like who I am and where I come from and why. And that's when the indigenous way just started to come through. And that's when the channeling started to come through. So yeah, some people might hear it and be like, oh man, or like see me and be like, oh, it's just, he lived in it his whole life. Is like, I did and I didn't. Like, it's not what you think it is.
I'll be the first one to own it, man. You know, as people may not know this, but we're just really getting to know each other. This is really the first conversation we've had directly. So I'll be the first one to own it, man. Like, that was definitely the story that I created about you. I was like, oh wow, the way he's carrying himself. I've seen videos of the way you articulate and express yourself in a very reverent manner. I was like, all right, well, he looks like he's about my age. So in order to have that level of embodiment of it, he must have been doing this since he was a kid. He must have grown up this way. He must have come out with all of the ceremonial accoutrement and everything. And so it's just it's number one, it's interesting how we create these stories about people. And number two, I think for so many of us who didn't grow up connected to anything that really resonated with us. I know I'm one of those people who grew up very loosely in a Roman Catholic background, like Roman Catholic expectations, being on the East Coast, and my grandfather was a deacon,
for sure.
But my mom and dad like weren't really religious, but they kind of put me through the motions. And then I graduated high school and I was like, well, I don't, none of that. I don't want any of that. There's got to be something else, and going on my own search and pursuit of it. And then ultimately connecting with a connection to spirit and ceremony that's not directly connected to me by my blood. Right. And so I know there's a lot of people, especially nowadays, where more of these ceremonies and more of these, plant medicines, and there's the access is so much greater.
Yes.
And people, I know there's this conflict for some people where they're saying, well, I didn't grow up this way. It's not technically the way of my people. How do I reconcile that? Or I don't even know how to connect to my people and my ways. I don't even know where to go. And if I could read a book, I could watch a YouTube video, but to really connect to a deeply rooted sense of ceremony and tradition, how do I do that? So just hearing your thoughts on that, man, because I'm sure it comes up being the man that you are.
Well, this is beautiful questions, and I love it all. And like, yes, recognizing the messenger when they're before you, right? So me growing up, not knowing exactly what it was I was immersed in because I was a child, then led me to cultural school, which helped me interpret everything. So, it's a remembrance. So why I'm saying that is, in this society we've created, orphans. We have people of mixed, bloodlines and lineages, yet they have no attachment to their ancestral homelands. They don't know what it is. There's no culture other than the, Euro-American culture that we're existing in Western society, like all these labels. And so, of course, we won't feel attached to any of these things because they're not involved in the art of human making like indigenous cultures are. A cultureless culture is involved in transactional relationships, marketplace talk, how many words we have for paper. You know what I mean? Like, what do we do? What do we do when it comes to death or love or, birth? Like, those things are hidden from us so much in this society. And we talk about this, on a regular basis, especially within the men's work. So when I think about people, they're like, hey, how do I connect to my ancestors? How do I do these things? How do I do that? I say firstly, how is your relationship to your mother and father? Because they like, I want to be connected to my ancestors. I'm like, yeah. How's your relationship to your mother and father? Are they alive? Are they dead? Do you have a good relationship with them? Do you talk to them? Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Oh, okay. How's your relationship to your grandparents? Do you know your grandparents? No. See, so it's like, for me, it's starting with that basic things. Like, do you know who your grandparents are? Do you know who your parents are? You don't have to have like the best relationship with them, but do you know them? Do you know who they are? Because ancestors are the same. These people in our lives, like just even like great to great, grandparents, those people are no longer alive. They're now ancestors. Were they perfect? No. Were they the most idyllic version of a human that we could have ever wanted? No, they were not. But that's how ancestors are. So we have to get real and raw with ourselves and our relationships before we start reaching for the stars, before we try to be gurus or medicine people or shamans or whatever that shit is. Like whatever that is, just be a human first. Just be a human first, and then watch everything start to come into place. You start calling it in. But if you're looking to grab it all the time and get the answer all the time, what makes you any different from colonizer? What makes you any different? You know, it's just another behavior.
And that's the key right there is I understand why. Because I've felt the urge from within me to attach onto something and to move very quickly with it. And anybody who has been around traditional and indigenous ways, everything's about take your time, slow pace, listen, slow down to the speed of wisdom so you can actually hear it. Because that, like you said, it is a colonial mindset, right? I see something, I want it, I'm going to go get it. It's like that manifest destiny. Because it is here, therefore it is mine if I claim it.
Yeah, just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Right. Yeah. And the reality is I love what you said about reconnect, like just mom and dad. This is something that I went through because when I presented this with Sacred Sons before, when we were talking about ancestry and having people think about that you come from, the fact that you're here is a miracle, right?
Yes,
there's so many people that could have been here whose bloodlines ended for one reason or another.
Yes.
Right? You are here because going all the way back to the first humans, there continued to be a successful passing of your DNA on. So
totally.
I totally understand the pain that people feel when they're like, I don't know where I come from. I don't know any of my ancestors' names past the ones that I met, or my grandparents, maybe my great grandparents. I ask people how many levels of ancestors do you know? It usually is like no hands up after 3 or 4.
Right.
And for me, one of the things that I did, which was very resemblant of what you shared, was starting with my mom and my dad, and then asking, okay, who were their parents? And then asking my aunties and uncles, like, who were their parents? And going back as far as I could and finding that I could actually go back about 5, almost 6 generations with names. And then starting to say those names every morning and giving thanks and saying, thank you for whatever you did in your life that I don't know about because I'm here. Even the things that were back to the violence, right? We're all products of violence at some point. Right? At some point, my ancestors beat someone else's ancestors. And that meant that I'm here. So great gratitude for everything and realizing that the whole spectrum of existence involves all of these things that half of which we usually don't want to admit or take ownership.
Yes, totally. Because, even with all that too, I see people want to have a romanticized view, which is great because I love romance. I love romanticism. I love it. But then the romantic ideal tends to strip people out of their own humanness, right? So like in this society, most culture within the society is birthed from exploited peoples, right? Or peoples that are shunned, like on the fringes of society, and they're put into the back alleys and things like that. That's where a lot of our American culture comes from, whether it's within the hip hop community, indigenous people on reservations, or it's, the prostitutes in the slums, like, jazz players, back in the cities. It's like those things came through from the muck and the mess and the dirty and the ugly deliciousness of life. That's where cultures emerge from the dark, And so when we get into this, I want, an ancestor angel is like, no, you can't. Like, I'm sorry, you can't have that. You can have your angels, but you just can't all of a sudden perceive your ancestor as just being anything other than human.
And why would we do that?
Right.
Why would we do that? Right. Like one of the worst things that we do to our children is hoist them up and create this idea that they must be perfect. So that's going forward. Why would we go back to our ancestors and do that to them?
Totally.
Anytime that was done to me, it made me really uncomfortable. Anytime like the expectations were perfection, otherwise you're not loved is
right.
Oh, why would I want to do that to anybody else in my bloodline? But
totally,
like, that's a great perspective you brought in there, man. Is like, I've noticed that myself without even thinking about it. I'm like, oh, my ancestors must have been some really wonderful, magical people because here I am. And how subtle the ego is just wrapped up in that. We want to imagine that we came from this legacy of rainbows and butterflies, but it's just another veil.
Yes, it is another veil. And that's why it was important too, like what you said with the ego. It's like, what is it that you're calling in? What is this thing? So this has been a very interesting, like kind of little thought game that I've been playing with people too. But it's just kind of like how I see the world. It's like, you know, we use this word of ego, right? Like super ego and the id and like all this stuff. And who's it come from? Freud, right? It's like, what's he? And then we have like the archetypes. And where's that from? Carl Jung. So I'm almost like, man, these guys, I don't know anything about them. Yet I speak their words more than I do my own grandparents, you know, with people. I'm like, what do they have to do with my life? You know, all of a sudden their psychotherapy has invaded my consciousness. And now I'm over here babbling around like I actually know what I'm talking about. And other people are like, mm-hmm. And I was like, wait a minute. This is a very psycho-spiritual, cultural dilemma that we're in. You know, I don't need to give Freud any more credit. I don't need to give Jung any more credit. I need to start giving more credit to the people who have come before me, who actually brought me into this world, not just invaded my thought space. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
Anything come up for you with that?
Oh, totally. Because ultimately that just reflects what our society values. We value convenience. We value efficiency. If you can put something into a system and package it, then it's going to be more attainable. And to me, I think that's ultimately just a reflection of laziness. Like we have all of a sudden decided that it's not valuable to be a thinker. Right? Oh, I don't have time to think. Just show me the way. Give me the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll make it happen. Because to sit down and actually think about what you just said, right? Yeah. Well, let me think about those archetypes. Does that actually? It might when I sit down and I think about, is it useful or not? That's why Bruce Lee is one of my favorite people in the world. Yeah. He said, take it, observe it all, right? Take it all in, but then you got to decide what's yours and make it your own. You know, reject everything else. And I don't think we take enough time to do that. We fall into these systems because it's easy, it's convenient, but it's lazy. And it's not honoring the way that things really are. Like sit down, look at nature. You spend 4 days sitting out in the wilderness and just being in relationship with everything around you. You learn things about the world and yourself. You don't need to read it in a book. Just go sit, be.
Yeah, exactly. So are we learning more from other men and women, or are we learning from the original teacher who gave us the original instructions, the original codes? And, you know, obviously there can be misalignments, right? With amongst people. Like if you're like, here's a quick story. I remember I was first hiking up Haleakala on the mountain. Not my first time, but meeting my friend, you know, up there for the first time we're going. So I show up, you know, and he's looking at me and he's like, oh, like, where's your gear? I'm like, what? I got like my backpack, my t-shirt, jacket around, and I got like slippers and shorts. And he's like, yeah, where's your gear? Do you have like, where's your hat and stuff? And I'm like, huh? And I'm looking at him. He's got 2 poles. He's got like 2-3 jackets on, jeans, freaking water bottles out his ears, like, you know, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, you look like an astronaut. Like I'm here walking on my mountain. Like I'm good, you know? And so it's like a misalignment in the sense of like what he thought nature is to him. It was like something to be conquered, something to move through so you can see these beautiful things, but it's going to be like, what's it called? It'll take a toll on you, right? Like it takes a toll on you. Where me, I'm just like, hey, here I am with the mountain and I'm going to be with my ancestors now. And why would I be afraid of what they have to offer to me, which is the sun and the rain and the clouds and, you know, the rugged terrain, whatever it may be. Well, I'm not trying to deny it or conquer it. Just be with that. Like how you're saying, sit out 4 days in nature. You'll learn something. You know, you'll learn something.
Well, and of course it'll be scary if you've never really exposed yourself to it. Right. I think it makes me think of the image of a child, right? Like if my child sees a stranger for the first time, and maybe it's a stranger who doesn't have just like a really beautiful angelic face and a warm and sunny disposition, it kind of gives them pause, right? They're like, I don't know about you. I'm not sure. But then, you know, being in a relationship with this person, and if they are, you know, genuinely a good person, then you see the child start to open up.
Yes.
So the only reason that we feel like nature is something to conquer or something that is dangerous, like all of these shows, right? Like Naked and Afraid and conquering them out. And it's like, oh man, it's not that. Of course, I feel like I need to armor up and gear up if I see the world around me as dangerous.
Yes.
But it's not, it's like that balance, right? Because it is where we receive life from, but it is also what might kill us. It's both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And there's grace in that. There's dignity in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like for most people, they don't see it like that. They see like death as a punishment for being alive.
Oh, say that one more time. Say that one more time, man. So
people see death as a punishment for being alive. Like somehow, oh, this is what happens because I chose to live and now I'm gonna die, and I don't want that. And so there's a strong sense of death phobia in the society. So that's why things like domestication are happening so much, and that's why our wild places are being destroyed. That's why there's environmental degradation and habitat loss and all these things. And the sixth great mass extinction is happening. And it comes from that. It comes from this absurd, like, it's not just a desire, this like demand for safety, this demand for everything to look a certain way and make it be whatever I say it is. And that's so damaging to all of life when we're not accepting of life and all of her glory. Like, so what I think about the ego, I'm like, maybe we've been casting this spell for so long that it's just run rampant and everyone is, being destroyed by our inability to know what we're speaking about and what we're actually communicating and how we are perceiving our relationships, especially to the natural world. So if there's a part within us, right, that we're trying to nullify because we're afraid of it, and we call it shadow work. It's my shadow. I got to get rid of my shadow. I got to get rid of my ego. There's something that needs to be get rid of. And of course, we're going to display that outside externally in the world, who has nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? They have nothing to do with our own bullshit that we've created. Yet they're the ones taking the hit, because nature has radical indigenous hospitality. She is not concerned about political allegiances. She's not concerned about how much money you got in your bank account. She doesn't care about what skin color you have, or even what you did in your past history. She doesn't care about your jail record. You're still going to get a coconut. You're still going to get bananas. You're still going to get the medicine that you need. She's not concerned. So for me, I'm like, why? Why have we created so much separation? I'm at this point in my life where like, it just doesn't even make sense anymore. Like we have so much going on, like that tells us otherwise. And we're still choosing. It's like still choosing to cause harm, still choosing to demand safety when you don't even feel safe within yourself and causing even more harm. Like I did it because I have good intentions. Huh? Come on. How many conversations have we had? How many things have we seen on the Ether Weaver about this? And we're just not willing to learn, brother. That's what's happening right now. And like my patience is thin with many people because of us, men like us. We're holding that. We're holding this ceremony. We're holding these ways of talking. We're holding this for our children, for our beloveds, for our village, the one that we hope to see, for our kids. Even if we don't see it, we're still doing the work. And then there's people who just willingly, active denial, willful ignorance, just coming at you. And that's where I'm saying that's violent. Your good intentions are violent to me and my people who are trying to live and survive and thrive amongst our community of life and all our relationships. That your good intentions are somehow manifest destiny all over again.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a little rant.
No, you're dropping a lot of the really thought-provoking things there, man. And I really just want to, without digging into them too much, I really just want to let a lot of that lie. Let people really soak that up. Maybe just back it up like 5 minutes and just take that in again. And I know that's something
totally.
I will do.
Yeah, me too.
The thing that came up in my mind when you were speaking, one of them was that saying, "Why do bad things happen to good people?"
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about, because you were saying, nature doesn't care, right? Nature doesn't care. You get a coconut, you get a banana, you get COVID, right? If anything, if COVID has taught us anything in the past 2 years, it's like, hey, that virus don't care who you are, where you come from, how much money is in your bank account. But that idea that, bad things happen to good people, it's like, no, things just happen to people.
Things happen to people.
That's life. Things happen. And then you respond how you will. That's your choice. That's your responsibility, is to respond how you will. And we've removed so much of our responsibility, the ability to actually be choiceful in how we respond. That we're so reactive and so scared of just existing on the planet. It's wild, man. It
is.
And at the same time, I humbly say that, like, I am cracking much of this for myself still. I find myself torn because I grew up in a box in the suburbs. Right? I grew up with this idea, these notions of what a good life looks like and providing a good life for your family looks like, that I don't subscribe to anymore. And it's more than just one lifetime's worth of work, I believe. It's a lot. It's a lot to cover in one lifespan, to go from life in the suburbs, go to school, get a job, take care of your family, to being in a heart-centered relationship with the land and all things. That's a lot of distance to cover.
It's a lot of distance.
So I think there's also just a little bit of compassion to have with ourselves, that my only mission is to do my very best to move my children far closer to and farther in the direction of what I think they need to have a good life. And for my great grandchildren who I'll never get to meet in the physical, you know?
Yeah, brother. These are all good prayers, man.
Yeah.
I hear those prayers.
And last, we're kind of coming up towards our time here, man, but I wanted to hear a little bit about, just obviously as a man who's in a position of leadership, a man who's a performer, a man who has a lot of prestige, just by the way you show. I can tell that when you speak, people listen. That's a powerful quality. It's not like that for everybody.
No.
But I've known a lot of people who are in those positions and they don't know how to hold it. I don't think it's their intention necessarily to take advantage of it, but something about the position that they're in, of leadership, of honor, whatever it is, somehow it corrupts them or it overcomes them.
Yeah.
How do you see that, and how do you keep yourself in the most humble place you can?
Yeah, and this is such a great question, man. So I guess the way I could approach it just a little bit more directly is that within these indigenous cultures, there's safeguards, right? Like little locking mechanisms that prevent you from overwhelming or taking over a leadership that then becomes of adverse or misaligned, right, to your people. And one of those, what I mean is, it's like when everyone around you has the sovereign, competency and ability to stand up and give their voice and lend it, and you as a leader, you can't hear that, then they take you out. Culturally, then you're done. Because it's like, oh, you're not listening. We have phrases in Hawaiian for the chief who does not listen. And so if you don't do that, then the people will rise up against you, right? Or they will just get rid of you and have another one. It's something like similar to mutual ground, like the commons, right? If Kale's coming in, and this is all supposed to be shared, right? Land, and then I bring my sheep over for a bit and they get to eat and do this, but then I decide not to leave, they're going to be like, hey, Kale, how come you're still here? Like, oh, I'm just waiting, feeding my sheep a little bit longer. If I do that 2, 3, 4 times, they're going to burn my house down and they're going to take all my sheep, because they're like, you're not respecting the village. You're not helping. So as a leader, that's very important to recognize that you are not, infallible. You are not permanent, and you are not in no way, shape or form, somebody whose position is like stuck. It's like, no, like you're a leader and a follower, right? You're a student and a teacher. Those things are existing at the same time. It's like being a great host is also being a great guest. If you're a great guest, you're a great host. Like in these positions of leadership where people are listening to you, this is what I've done for myself. And it's not just about humbleness. I have a lot of pride and confidence too, but it's listening to my people. I don't act unless the relationships say so. If I have enough relationships that have my back and I listen to them, and then I must provide for them too. It's a high trust value that is necessary as a leader. And if you can't garner that trust, what good is your performance as a leader? It doesn't matter. How much authority you have doesn't matter. How much control and ability to manipulate? For what? To what end? Supplying your own self with all your needs and desires through other people? That's like, what are we doing? That's the same thing again that we're trying to get away from. So I go to Sweat Lodge. Pour Sweat Lodge, I go to Sweat Lodge and I pray. I humble myself in the womb of the mother. I go other ceremonies. I have awa ceremony. I do tree planting ceremony, whatever it may be. The ritual in the ceremony keeps me intact, so I can continue to be a leader. But also, I know that my place in that, as that role, is not just for me. I'm getting ready for the next generation. So one day I'll become a patriarch of some sort. An elder. Somebody that, at least has a little bit of value, still sitting in his chair, rocking back and forth, drinking his lemonade. And if I'm fortunate enough to have some younger people come around and it's like, hey, what was it like when you were my age? And they're like, hey, I just want to be able to look them in the eye and say, hey, I did my best. Before all these things started coming around and all the drones and the machines flying and having this new metal arm, at a time when I was your age, I did my best. That's how I see about leadership is like, if people only look at their leadership in this narrow view, and that's all they're going to get. That's all they're going to do. But I'm looking at leadership from what I needed when I was younger, what I could possibly be in the future, and then who I am right now. Am I answering those calls? Yeah. Am I being responsible, responding to?
Dude, that's such a good indicator, man. I want to throw that filter on top of all the people that I see in positions of leadership, because I think very much the same way myself, when it comes to vision, I literally envision and imagine myself as an old man. And what do I need to do at this point in my life? The reason why I'm loyal and faithful to my wife, the reason why I continue to show up and do everything I can for my kids and never walk out on them is because I've already imagined the stories that I want to be able to tell as an old man. And that is what helps me get over the ego, the desires, the things that tempt me to just take care of and think of myself by thinking about, well, who do I really want to be? Because I don't get to tell those stories in integrity if I haven't actually lived them. And I think there's some people who either don't think about that. They don't think about who do I want to be as an old man, if I'm fortunate enough to get there, enough to inform my decisions now, or they have thought about it and they're like, well, I don't really care too much about any of that stuff. I just want what I can get for myself right now.
Yeah.
And so I really like that, man. And then you said that thing about as a leader, you're impermanent.
Yeah.
That's just solid gold right there. I'm not even going to say anything more about that. I'm just going to let that one rest on everybody's ears because that's gold.
I love you, man.
You're such a great brother, man. I'm really glad that we got to connect. I could talk to you for days and days on end, I'm sure.
Brother, feelings mutual.
Someday we will. I want to hit you with some lightning questions before you tell everybody how to follow you and find out what you're up to. All right?
Oh, okay.
All right.
We're going to play a game? Okay.
We're going to play a game, man. Let's play. First thing, what is the one thing you wished you learned back when you were 18 years old?
Oh, my gosh. Bitcoin. I don't know. Bitcoin. Google. I don't know.
There you go. All right. What do you think is the most important value to have as a man?
Oh, man. Man, like love and generosity. This is what's coming right now.
I was going to make you pick one, but I'll give you two.
Okay.
All right. And then what is the one thing the world needs more of from men right now?
Oh, presence. Yeah. The world really needs us to show up, embodiment, it's come back into it. Oh man, sorry.
Love it, man. Good one. So tell the good people out there where they can follow you, find out about what you're doing. I know you have this new project that you're working on. Tell us all the things. Yes,
absolutely. So most of my engagement with people is through Instagram, and it's my name, simple, Kale, Ka'alekahi, Kaalekahi. And then I also have this project I'm working with my brothers called New Blood, Old Souls. You can also find us on Instagram. So I also have coursework. I do one-on-one mentoring. If you check out the bio in the Instagram, you can find the link tree, and then I'll have my course. I'll be launching soon. I'll be putting one out every month. And then I also have my one-on-ones that I do as well. So also a lot of work with Sacred Sons. Hopefully you and I can collaborate, Jeddy, on things that you got going. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been really great. One last little thing is a lot of the phrasing and things that I use is not solely my own. These are things that have come by way of my teachers, my mentors, my family, my traditions, and my ways that I don't just claim for myself, but I know simply a vessel, simply a vessel for these things, a channel for this ancient future, the new old way, the tea now of things. And the language that comes about is in hopes that we can continue this emergent culture of awakening, and everybody on their journey is not solo one. Our navigation is still being done with the stars and the elements and the cardinal directions around us. So as long as we start speaking like that's real, then this vision that we want for our children will come. So that's my prayer.
Oh, it's a beautiful prayer, man. To be the hollow bone for all the wisdom bone. Just to make its way to the next chorus.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of mutual love and respect to you, my brother. I look forward to many more conversations with you and collaborations in the future. Thank you for your time, for your prayers, for your wisdom and your work. It's so evident in the way you present yourself, man. So
thank you, my brother. Much love.
Here.
And ancestors continue to guide us and reveal themselves to us.
Aho.